Hi, friends. Kind of following up on Christian marriage as a sacrament of service, I thought it would be appropriate to talk about how to live as Christian parents. How to live as Christian parents, as mom and dad, or if you've gone through the pains of divorce, as mom, as dad. Doing your best to raise your children. How to do that. Well, Jeff Cavins gives some great insight that are based on biblical principles about how to live your life as a Christian. A few points. The first is that you pray for your children. Pray for your children. Like, pray as husband and wife, pray as mom and dad. Get down on your knees, literally or figuratively, before you go to bed at night and pray for your children. Your intentions for them, for their safety, for their protection, but also, of course, pray that they come to know God, stay with God, get closer to God, find their purpose in God, find happiness, and all the stuff that you who love your children would be praying for. The mundane stuff and the sacred stuff. Pray for all of that. But here's an important caveat to praying for your children, and that is that when you do that on a regular basis, guess what happens? You focus on the needs of your children. Both the everyday stuff, but also the supernatural stuff. As you, for instance, praying for your children every day to grow closer to God and to know Him and to work through sin and temptations and to stay away from bad influences and drugs and all that kind of stuff, as you're praying for them to find peace and joy and happiness and their purpose in this world and to find the right spouse or, and the list goes on and on, whatever it is that you're praying for. When you're doing this day in and day out, not only are you praying for them, but you yourself are focusing on their needs. And here's my point, is that if you're focusing day in and day out, like on their sacred needs, on their spiritual needs, you're far more likely than you yourself to be attentive to those spiritual needs. It's a mix of this. It's a mix of grace and nature, of the natural and the supernatural, of God doing work and you doing work. But when you pray for these things, we are far more inclined to be about the work of doing these things, not just expecting God as some magician in the sky to do the work. Another way of saying it is, where your treasure is, there is your heart. Well, when you concentrate on your treasure every day in the context of prayer, your children being your treasure, there your heart will be. But it will be right in the midst of your greatest treasure, who is God Himself. All in the context of a prayer that is prayed over and over again. Keeps your heart focused and your work focused. Another thing that parents can do to live as Christian parents today is to share the insights of your faith with your children. Here's the bottom line. Our world is sharing all kinds of insights with your children every day. So the next thing is that Jeff Cavins points out of how to live your life as a Christian parent today is to share the insights of your faith with your children, the treasures of your faith, the gems of your faith, the wisdom of your faith with your children. Here's the bottom line. The world is sharing all that it has with your children every day, right? It's sharing its insights with your children every day, regardless of whether your children are young and school age and growing up in your families or your children are adults. There's never a time that you stop sharing the insights of your faith, because there never will be a time when other people are sharing their philosophies with your children. And here's the thing, we're not talking about philosophies or opinions or preferences or lifestyles. We're talking about a person and the treasures of that person, Jesus Christ, and all that God wants to give to your children through the conduit of faith. So you'll always be up against that. Therefore, we always have to be sharing our faith with our children and not rely upon them getting it by osmosis, or getting it by the TV or by their friends, or even that we would think that a religion class in a school or in a parish would be enough sharing when it's piled up against all the other sharing that the world is giving them and their friends are giving and so on. So share your insights with your children. How to do that? I'll give you an example. Like a lot of us during the COVID time are finding ourselves around the dinner table a lot more. And not just because we're isolated, but because there are no sports and other activities competing. When we go back into the world, or if we're already back into the world, then maybe think about the schedule of your children and what they're going to go back into and not go back into, and how much and how maybe not as much, so that there are times that you schedule to sit around with your children and as a family and share the insights of your faith. How to do that? At the dinner table, where you're not just beginning with, bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, and then you chow down, but come with expectations. And the more that you do this, the more it becomes the culture of your table, a practice a tradition that carries on for years. Like, for instance, the Catechism. There's, a catechism for children. It's called UCAT. And it's for all different ages. And you give that to your kids and say, hey, pick something out to come to the dinner table and discuss. Teach us, your brothers and sisters and your parents, what you learned from there. It doesn't have to be something long, just a paragraph. Or come with a question that comes from the UCAT. Or come willing to also listen to your brothers and sisters, or to listen to me, your mom and your dad, or listen to me, your parent. And you are sharing and they're sharing, and you have questions, they have questions. That's how faith grows. It's okay to question. It's okay then to also look for answers on your own and to share that as a family. It's called the Domus Ecclesia, the home church. You have far more opportunities to share the faith in your home than you ever will in a school or an hour on a Sunday at a church. Those have their places, those contribute to it, especially when you attach the sacraments, but they're all part of one organism. Of one structure, of one body, and they all have a part. So share your faith and find something like a dinner table and something like a UCAT or the scriptures or something like that you can go back to and go through over the course of a year or two, and then pick up something else. Share your faith. How else are your children going to be living the Christian life as children, and then later as adults, than if they don't learn it in the home? Yes, prayer, but also yes, sharing. Which leads to the next point that Jeff Cavins makes, and that is that you also are not just sharing your faith with your kids and praying with your kids, but you're also becoming the person that you want your children to become. Let me put it more succinctly. Become what you want your children to become, saints. Because any Christian in their right mind wants that for their children. As long as you understand what a saint is, right? Because there's all kinds of false impressions about what saints are. What are saints? Well, first of all, saints are people who have a relationship with Christ and who over time want that relationship to develop and mature. And in that relationship, they find their purpose in this world. They find their happiness in this world. They find what relationships should be a part of their lives, and what are good and holy and true and noble relationships, and what ones are not. They find their mission in this world. They find themselves, and they are able to help. Here's another one. Find other people, find themselves, and what is purposeful and meaningful in this life. Now, when I define sainthood that way, who doesn't want that for their children? Things like happiness and a purposeful existence and good friends and peace and a sense of themselves and their mission and why they're in this world and what it's all about and how to avoid evil and unhappiness and how not to become addicted and too attached and live a disordered life and how not to get lost and how to be found. And who doesn't want that for their children, right? That's sainthood. That's what it means to be in a relationship with Jesus Christ. That is a saint. Now, if you as a parent want that for your children, and again, who in your right mind as a parent wouldn't want that, then become that. Become what it is that you want your children to become and to have and to experience and to hold and to fight for and to love and to live abundantly in this world. Become that. And the reason why is that if you don't become that, how in the world would they ever become that? Because you are the primary influence in their life. And not just, again, when they're children, yes, certainly, but all for the rest of their life, as long as you have a relationship with even your adult children. You are the primary influence in their life. And so, it's interesting when you look at a lot of the polls that are out there today that talk about people who grew up in a faith and then left the faith. And there's just a ton of social science research behind that. And they're asking, for instance, college students who go to college, and the majority of them, by the way, by the time they get into college, either don't have faith, or by the time they get into college, they've left the faith, okay? And I can cite all of them. Just Google it yourself. You'll see them. Parents don't want that for their children. But before they get into college, they don't want them to lose their faith. And they certainly don't want it to lose in college. And then when they're out after college looking for a spouse and looking for their place in this world, they want them to have that anchor and that compass in their life, right? If they love them. So a lot of the polls are showing us that they're leaving now. And what's interesting is that when they're asked why they've left the faith, we're getting the same or similar responses. Because I never had it in the home. And when you mine down a little bit deeper with some more in-depth polls, questions are asked, well, did you go to church? Yeah. Did your family pray? Yeah, sometimes. Were you in a school that taught religion? Yeah. Or did your church have some sort of religious classes? Yeah. But when they're asked, did they have faith? Like, did the faith, was it alive? Most of them say no. Like in my home, it wasn't modeled for me. There wasn't the example of that. I didn't get that from my mom and dad. It wasn't something that was important to us. It wasn't something that we lived. It's something we did on a Sunday for an hour. And then we went about our lives busy and engaged and involved, deeply engaged and involved with so many other things, but never deeply engaged involved with Christ and our religion. So what they end up saying is that there's nothing to go back to because there was nothing there in the first place. And what tragedy that is, and what heartache that is to moms and dads who love their children. That their children say, there's nothing to go back to. So what would I go back to anyways? And that circles us back then to what you want for your children. Sainthood, as the church defines it, as Christ defines it. If you want that for your children, and not just when they're with you, but then when they're with their spouses and raising their children and trying to make a difference in this world, rather than the world overcoming them, overcoming the world. If you want that for your children, then want it for yourself. And if you want them to have it, then go get it for yourself. Become a saint. Saints produce saints, right? And that's what Jeff Cavins is coming to, is that it's these parts. It's praying for your children. It's passing on and sharing the insights of faith. And then it's becoming what it is that you want your children to become. And then the very things that we want as a family, our families to be intact, our families to be whole, or our families to be healed, our families to love one another and to have happiness and to be together for years across generations, and then for us, our family members, to be in heaven together, right? Those will come about because we're praying for one another, because we're sharing faith with one another, and we're becoming saints together. Until next time, folks.